Got me falling right back.
So one of the main questions that I see either on Facebook or YouTube on my channel is people realize they end up asking, do I have CO2 on this tank? And I always say no. And obviously ever since we set this tank up, we never did CO2. I did plan on it, but we just never put CO2 on this tank, and I kind of just left that out because I thought, why not, make this into a low tech, not really a low tech, really everything about this tank is high tech, it just doesn't have CO2, but people are always wondering how I get my tank to look like this, because they think I do have CO2, and they're always surprised when I say I don't, because my tank looks most of the time just as good and vibrant as if it had CO2. So people always wonder that. And so today I'm going to kind of just explain kind of what I've done to, maintain a scape like this and get the plants to look this good. Mind you, it does take longer to grow a tank like this. That's kind of obvious. CO2 does make stuff grow a lot faster and will make your plants look better. But you could still make your plants look as good. It will take longer, but you can eventually get there, and it can look just like this or even better than mine. So, and then one disclaimer: if you want a really good plant tank without CO2, you're still gonna have to spend a little bit of money, and that's just how it is. The more money you spend, the better quality you're gonna get. It's just it's just how it is with aquariums. But your plants just might not look as great if you don't go with the things I tell you to, but we could still get around there. And if you guys have questions, I can definitely answer anything in the comments, but I'll kind of run through what I would do if I was you, if you wanted to do a non-CO2 setup. So obviously there's three main things in a plant tank. You need CO2, nutrients, and light. Those are the three main things that keep plant tank in check. That's what keeps balance. And obviously we're eliminating CO2. So when you eliminate one of those three factors, you get problems like algae and all that. So we gotta, now the algae part isn't a problem because you're always gonna get some type of algae. I'll tell you ways to kind of help prevent that in the beginning and ongoing, but we'll talk about how we can get around that stuff. So the first thing I always talk about is the substrate. It's the main thing. It's what your plants are getting all its food from, its nutrients, and we're gonna talk about ferts in a second. But the main thing, even if you don't even use ferts, the main thing is substrate. Now, I see a lot of people use stuff like when a lot of beginners, when they want to put live plants, and most of the time they'll have like a gravel or even just sand, maybe a play sand, something like that. And some plants will do okay. Obviously, they're not going to look great. The only plants that do kind of good are maybe some crypts, some type of Java fern. Obviously, you have to attach those to a rock or wood, but because they don't really need substrate. That's why I say that. Or like anything like Anubias and all that stuff like that doesn't need substrate. But there's a couple plants that are good without a really good substrate. But if you're gonna have a lot of variety of plants and stem plants like this, you're gonna need a good substrate. And like what I have 88 Amazonia. You guys have probably heard of it. It's pretty much the best you can buy. There's other stuff. There's Tropica. I know Fluval Stratum is another good one that people like to use. They all look the same. They all kind of do the same. It's just obviously some do better. ADA is really good. It lasts way longer than any of the others, and I really don't know nutrients wise if any of them are really actually better. I'm assuming the ADA probably has a little bit more, but what the ADA gives you that's better than the rest is the lasting longer. I've had this set up for probably a year and a half now, and yeah, it's still holding up. So I'd really recommend a good substrate. Any of those three I recommended are really good. If you have sand, what you can do is get root tabs, and what those do is these little tabs, they just look like little tabs, little squares, and you just plant them, place them under the substrate, and it basically just provides nutrients for your plants if you don't have a nutrient substrate like this. So that there's ways to get around it. So next thing is light. Now it's another thing, people always don't have put good lights. They either buy cheap, shop lights, which they do work, but again, if you want if you want your plants to really pop and grow and lush, it's just what you're gonna have to. So yeah, like I said, like the shop lights do work, and a lot of like custom made. I know there's a lot of DIYers, especially beginners, that like to build their own stuff. But in this video, if we're talking about how to really get a really good looking tank without CO2, we kind of have to go past that and look at some of the more premium options. Now, I'm not saying a $300-$400 light. There's tons of that out there, because if we go back to those three main things, that's if you get a light that's super powerful, obviously you can dim them down, but to prove our point, if you get a light that's way too powerful, it's just gonna throw everything off. So you still want a good light, but you don't want anything that's too insane. Like what I have, a Phoenix SE, great light. It does everything you need it to do. It can grow pretty much any plant, and it produces a lot of power, but it's not outrageous. It does exactly what it needs to do, and it's a great light. And it's around $120, and honestly, any light in the hundreds, I would say 100 to 150. I mean, I know there's stuff even cheaper than that actually does pretty good too. Any of those range, that's what I'd really shoot for. Just a light that's just a little more better than what you'd probably usually have on your tank. Because if you're going for a really nice plant tank, it's just what you have to do. You just have to look into some of those premium options. It's going to help your plants way in the long run. And especially, I'm probably going to make a whole other video on the carpeting plants, but especially for carpeting plants, light is really important for carpeting. But I can talk about that in a whole nother video. So the last thing is dosing. Now, most of you guys are probably going to do like an all-in-one, like something like this. This is Aquarium Co2's Easy Green. Great fertilizer. Does what it needs to do. So obviously most people are just going to do something like this because they don't want to worry about dosing a million different things. Same, I'm with you. Obviously I'm probably not going to, for this tank I've been going with all-in-ones, but I'm definitely going to switch it up soon when this runs out. I'm just going to, because I kind of want to dose my own stuff in the future, but an all-in-one will definitely work. And I'm going to put a link on one of the fertilizer videos I made on this, because you can run into a lot of problems fast, because without CO2, again, we're throwing off one of those factors, and first is one. And so you don't want to dose, without CO2, you don't want to dose a full, like here, let's see, I think it says, yeah, 1 pump per 10 gallons. You do not want to do that if you don't have CO2. If you have CO2, yeah, you can go ahead and do 1 pump per 10 gallons. That's perfectly fine, because it can handle it, and as long as it's balanced. But except without CO2, we kind of have to do something about that. So what I do, I usually go about half that dosage, and I do it probably every 2 weeks. I don't do a lot of fertilizer. It's just as long as it's getting something. You can go, I would say you can go like a quarter of a squirt every week, or you can just do a half a squirt every 2 weeks. I just go every 2 weeks. I can remember that pretty easily. But whatever your schedule, whatever you want to do, that's kind of up to you and how your tank works out. But the main thing to take away from this is do not do full dosage of fertilizer if you do not have CO2. So that's one thing. And really, I kind of just wanted to go over the three main things, and that's basically it. But obviously, the only thing I say if you don't have CO2, the only thing I would say to stay away from is like more like the redder plants or orange, just more of exotic colored plants, because there's a couple red plants that can do well in non-CO2, but some plants, they just really do need CO2, and it's just kind of what it is. They're not going to do well at all. But in a tank like this, what I have, just some S-Repins, you got a new BS. You got Bacopa Carolina, Java Fern, narrow species. Stuff that's, like S. repens, it's a little bit harder. The Bacopa, a little bit harder. But really, everything in here is, manageable, and nothing's really that hard. And like I said, some of these plants are actually a little harder to grow, like these S. repens, and people always tell me, or even this Monte Carlo, people always tell me that I have to have CO2. There's no way you can grow any of that without it. And looky here, it's all really bright and green and growing just nicely. I mean, I just planted all this stuff, and look how well it's already sprouting up, and it's gonna grow real nicely, like these ones do. So yeah, I don't want to drag this video out longer than it needs to be, but if you guys really do have questions, definitely let me know. And other than that, comment, like, subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next.